Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1002 social media innovation, and this week I'm going to cover the topics for the 8th lecture, which is titled electronic music sharing. And last week what we talked about was the idea that music and the experience of music has always been a kind of social activity, and that we come together around ideas about music which are culturally formed and are a cultural social experience, and that this experience changes as the technology changes and our expectations of how we pass songs around. So previously we went from a kind of, if you like, a folk appreciation, passing things from mouth to mouth, to a kind of, introduce printed music and notation of music, which then turned into sheet music, and was turned into the next stage following that was recorded music and the development of the shellac disc, and then eventually we ended up with Napster and MP3s and file sharing and music piracy, as if there is some kind of continuity between those things, which there isn't, except the idea that these constitute social experiences. So we're thinking about, in all things that we do, we're thinking about media and the technology that shapes and forms the media as a social practice, not just as a technological or a mediated practice in itself, although they are important as well. So what I want to talk about this week is the idea that we've shifted into a kind of an age of electronic music sharing. So, networks, and we use the internet and the digital realm in order to be able to access and we're aware of, and we can, endlessly accessibility of music these days through things like YouTube and subscription and streaming services like Spotify. So what we'll start off with, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit into looking at the album and the kind of social experience that people have about collecting vinyl and what records meant. And it's really important for us to kind of get kind of an understanding of why particular forms of music are important for particular generations of people, and that people put a lot of, if you like, emotional connection into things like, cassette tapes and things like vinyl albums, because there's something in the artifact, and there's a kind of an element of what's called, kind of retro mania about some of these things. It's something that Simon Reynolds talks about. But what we have lived through the transition of is the idea that, and you're really the first generation that is coming through with this as normal, and that it didn't change it changed before your adult years, if you like. It had already changed in your formative years, whereas the generation ahead of you, if you like, this changed in their adult years and after their formative years. So the change is locked into your experience, it might be argued. So we'll look at some of the ideas of how this has changed. And one thing we'll do is we'll look at the Arctic Monkeys and the way that they kind of challenge some of the norms and standards of music distribution and music, and ideas about building up an audience and expressing a kind of interest in particular topics and themes which related to an audience which they understood, but which the music press and the traditional music publishers and the kind of traditional record companies at the time really kind of had no idea about. So they gained insight into a culture, into a world, which was very different from the mainstream culture, if you like, at that time. They've subsequently gone on to be a big mainstream band and using all the tricks of the trade that the music industry offers, and the music industry has changed around them in order to facilitate that. So we're going to look at the idea of kind of how networks are used and how data is used these days in music collection, music sharing, and what it is in terms of what are the key attributes of a peer-to-peer network that drives people's take-up of music in a world which is about data management. But at the same time, this is also about kind of how fans engage in the process. And one of the things that's happened is that, being a fan of an artist or a band is no longer a one-way form of communication, but it's a two-way form of communication. So you end up with fans being able to influence the future direction that bands take, because fans have a stronger voice. Not always a voice that's listened to, it must be said, but it's a voice that is important, and that actually music companies now mine the interactions and the engagement and the diatribes and the passions and the joys and the fears of fans, in order to be able to kind of generate a kind of connection and a kind of an active social network. And so we've kind of seen a shift, if you like, in the music industry, which has gone from the performer performs to the performer gives the fans what they want. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is, we can argue about that, and it would be great to see maybe some of your own examples about this in your blogs. So it's kind of fan opinions now matter, or said to matter, but what impact does this have on our, on the culture that we create through music and the kind of stances that we take? Does this mean, because we have this kind of ever-present ability to consume music and to share music, does that mean that we get no breakthrough moments, that something kind of doesn't come along in the same way that it might have done in the past, and kind of suddenly shift the direction and the boundaries of music culture? Or is it something which is it's the accumulation, if you like, of a whole series of different streams of activity and information that flow through the artist, but actually it's about the fan? So looking at fan remixes and fandom is going to be an important thing that we look at as in future weeks. So the notes, as ever, are up on the wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. If you go to the TECH1002 section, you'll find them posted in the lecture notes section. And is there anything else I need to add? No, plenty of opportunity to chat with John about your coursework in the workshop sessions. So hopefully you're getting on with those activities. But we can talk about those things. If you've got any questions, use the DMU Talk portal. It's at talk.our.dmu.ac.uk, and you can access that online. You can load it if you go to the App Store on your phone, you can load it onto either Android or Apple phones, as well as using it as on a PC or something like that. So talk.our.dmu.ac.uk. Okay, see you at the lecture.